Nvidia has reported revenue of $44 billion for the first fiscal quarter, marking a significant 69% increase from last year. That is despite losing $2.5 billion in potential sales to China due to export restrictions. The company's data center segment, crucial for AI technology, saw a revenue rise of 73% to $39 billion. Now, adjusted net income grew by 31% to $19.89 billion, although Nvidia anticipates a projected revenue of $45 billion for the current quarter, slightly below analyst expectations. Trade tensions with China posing challenges, US tech firms also increasing investment in AI. Would you believe this? Expected spending to exceed $345 billion this year. We may all be in the wrong business. Let's bring in Brad Gastworth from Unearthing Opportunities. Spectacular results, but the market still went down.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at the Dow, a lot of tension here still with trade and what's going on the macro level. I mean, the Nvidia numbers were solid. I mean, if you look at data center sales growth, it's still showing that we're in the infancy of AI growth, and it's going to continue to linger for years. So they're going to continue to benefit. But yeah, I mean, on the broader market, we saw some sell off with some commentary, but the Nvidia numbers were quite solid, Aaron.
Extraordinary demand for Nvidia's Blackwell AI chips. What's driving the explosive demand?
Yeah, I mean, it's as simple as I think all companies need to integrate AI. And if you are not spending on AI, you're going to be left in the dust. And, we're still in such early days of this transition for tech infrastructure for a majority of companies that this is going to have a long tail to it. So, I mean, you're seeing that data center, that's where that growth is coming from. You got the cheaper chip now, Blackwell, which actually is going to hurt margins a little bit here in the near term, but it might actually boost it up later on. But that's really where the spend, it's coming from core enterprises that are spending a significant amount of money here for AI.
Pretty incredible stuff, but how concerned should investors be about US trade policy and how that could impact Nvidia's China sales? Really, are we going to be watching the next quarter to see if there's any impact?
Yeah, I think, and that's really that's the $1 trillion question here. And I think it's going to absolutely, every investor and potential investor needs to watch what's happening on the global trade side. I mean, one, they're talking about the impact from China already, having an impact, which, is for good reason. I mean, there's certain chips that aren't being able to be sold. But yeah, I mean, if you look at even the news recently from the EDA side, having some of these companies now stopping sending some of their products out to China because they want to slow down some of this chip development. I think this is going to continue until there's an absolute deal, which I don't think is coming anytime soon. So clearly we got that pause. Both sides say they want to work together, but still stopping spend and stopping certain chips from being bought overseas is not helping. So I think we're going to keep asking this question each quarter, I believe.
And talk to us about Nvidia, how they're managing supply chain constraints, because demand is just ramping up. Everyone wants these chips. How are they managing it?
Yeah, and it's another great question there, Aaron, because if you look at TSMC, which is producing majority of these chips, I mean, you've seen some constraints, and even on the mineral side of rare earth. I mean, depending, and this goes again to the China question, are they going to limit some of these raw materials that are needed to build these chips? Now, there's been bigger constraints previously. We've sort of surpassed the worst of that over the last, call it several quarters. But certainly we have to pay attention to it, because if we do get some limitations to some of the materials that go into semiconductors, that's certainly going to have an impact. Now, well, the other big question: will investors care, and will they give them sort of a free quarter if that has an impact? I think people still see the long tail here, but the question will become, if this is going to have a major impact and for how many quarters, if it's sustainable, then investors will absolutely care.
All right, let's shift topics. The US has just blocked major software firms like Synopsys and also Cadence from selling advanced chip design tools to China, a bold escalation of tech tension. Shares in both companies plunged over 11%, investors bracing for revenue shocks and also potential regulatory fallout. Brad, talk to us about how significant you see this move from the US over that US-China chip war.
Yeah, I think this is quite significant. I mean, so these EDA firms, they have this software that allows you to build these, next generation semiconductors and electronics, and a lot of them are AI related. So by prohibiting shipment of this next gen software to countries like China, it essentially slows down their AI development. So there's been reports countering the U.S. Talking about how China is going to be rapidly spending to boost up their EDA capabilities. Again, this is software to build out prior to actually building it out physically. It shows it on a software landscape. To me, it's a big deal. Obviously these are not small companies, but I think again, it just goes to show you that the U.S. wants China to slow down in this race, and I think they believe that they're doing, incredibly well in AI, and they want to slow that down.
How do you think China, how fast can they realistically catch up with domestic EDA tools?
So I think EDA will be quicker than, let's say, some of the tooling actually on the testing supply. So on the semiconductor side, they're still behind. On the software, I don't think it will take that long, quite honestly. You have some advanced systems, but on the software side, software's always moved incredibly faster to be able to be produced. And I think I don't see this being years of a delay. I think you're talking a few quarters where they put a tremendous amount of spend and compute and some engineers around building up an EDA, sort of platform of their own.
And what are the long-term risks, you think, to US semiconductor dominance? Because obviously you've got China and other countries that are desperately trying to get there. And if there is geopolitical tensions, particularly around Taiwan, everyone's going to need semiconductors very quickly, and they're going to need to do it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's really such an important question, and Taiwan is really like right in the middle of it because China believes it's their territory. Taiwan obviously believes they're sort of independent, and we have strong relationships with Taiwan and manufacturing. So the way this will shake out will be quite interesting. But yeah, I mean, right now Taiwan still builds a significant portion of semiconductors globally, and if that does, if this trade war continues to escalate, and then if all of a sudden Taiwan is caught in the middle and they get sort of taken over like how Hong Kong, or if mainland use acts of force to take it, there's going to be all kinds of chaos and sort of tensions getting even stronger. I see this as actually, I don't think we get there. I think at some point, the mainland will try to take Taiwan to be part of one China, as they've been stating for years. But I think right now, I mean, you have the U.S. is trying to diversify manufacturing. It won't make sense in the U.S. because it's too expensive. Now you can build things that are automated, but for a majority of these things that can't be fully automated, you have to go overseas. Taiwan right now is the biggest. There's other parts in Southeast Asia like Vietnam, and even Cambodia and Laos. Even though there's government issues in those countries, their port side, which is really good for shipment. I wouldn't be surprised to see more diversification outside of the Taiwanese region, and even out of mainland China, where we saw even like iPhone, for example, where majority is being built in mainland, but Apple's trying to diversify because of those risks as well. But these are really the most important questions around semiconductors because they are the fuel to everything that's going to be needed with the AI revolution. So absolutely the right questions here.
Oh, it's fascinating. I was in Taipei just last week, and the idea that China, the mainland, would try and have some military action on Taiwan, nothing feels further from possible. It just seems so unrealistic that that would happen. This free, open, happy society, a democratic society, the concept that some ships are going to rock up and some missiles are going to rock up just feels like a distant reality. The idea that they're talking about by 2027 seems pretty terrifying. Let's move on to our final topic. And the US has issued a fresh warning to global companies about using Huawei's Ascend AI chips, tightening the noose on China's tech ecosystem. Chips now effectively banned under a presumption of denial, raising serious risks for supply chains and R&D teams worldwide. Brad, Huawei has been in the sights of Western governments, particularly the US. Australia banned them being part of 5G tech. Then we saw the UK allowed them and then banned after the US got interrupted as well. The big question is about Huawei and AI and the threat that China could pose to AI systems, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's been actually some really good talks around this and what the plan behind Huawei's chips. I mean, there's the biggest concern here is security, and then also as AI gets more developed and advanced, it's really the policing of these artificial technology systems. So if all of a sudden the Huawei chip is used in some of these policing robots, and you have AI infrastructure, Huawei chips, they're all going to speak together. And that's really the reason behind the US trying to ban it. There's also data capture and some things that people are concerned about, which keeps going deeper into the concerns. But yeah, I mean, the U.S. has been pretty negative towards Huawei over the last several years. Beginning of the first Trump presidency, when I went to Asia, I used to always carry two phones, and I used to have a Huawei high-end phone, and it was a phenomenal handset. And then, after we made decisions, it got blocked here in the U.S. I couldn't use it anymore. But I think that you're going to see more companies, especially in the U.S., really not try to adopt any of these Chinese AI technology, and Huawei specifically. And I think given the bans, there's been some companies that have worked around it because of cost. I think it's going to be fewer and fewer as the weeks and quarters go by. But I think it's a very important security risk that I think is really behind the banning of it. That I think as we get to robotics and as we get to more super AI and intelligent AI, it's what systems actually policing it is going to be the big question here.
Do you see this triggering retaliatory measures or further tech decoupling as well? And do you think that companies will start to self-regulate so they don't get into legal trouble?
I don't think it'll be self-regulated. I think it's going to be sort of it will be determined by how these other companies sort of react on purchasing outside of the U.S. I think in the U.S. it's pretty clear that companies are not going to take the chance buying Huawei chips. And then even when we looked at the Huawei telecommunications gear when it got 5G, those bans also in the U.S. several years ago, it didn't have this major issue overseas. I mean, the EU was still and still continues to be very big purchasers of Huawei chips and infrastructure. So in Europe, it's very much a Huawei controlled environment. But I think it's going to. I mean, in terms of retaliation, Aaron, I think I think it will a lot depend on how and what happens here in the near term with the tariffs with China and U.S. and what actually happens. I again believe that something is not going to be as easy as some of the media is portrayed because of the pause. I think there's a lot of big issues here, and I don't see either side really backing down. So, if we happen to get some type of nice deal that's amicable, I think there'll be less of a concern. I have a hard time seeing that happen.
All right, we'll leave it there. No Huawei chips for you. I'll talk to you soon.
Perfect. Thanks, Aaron.